From our studios this week in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tag, the theme park in 30. I'm Philip, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. On Green Tag, we look at the top news each week and explain why it matters to theme park professionals. And this week, we're going to do things a little bit differently. This is our first show of 2026, and it's a slow news week. So we're taking the approach of doing sort of like a state of the industry or a SWOT analysis on what's going on in the industry.
Go ahead and make those comments, whether you agree with us, disagree with us, have a different point of view, different reference, because again, that's the purpose of this show.
Yep.
What are those things, Philip, that you think are the strength? Let's just go straight through the SWOT, and that way everybody can follow where our heads are at. And that way they're not, pre-organized, because some of the things that you might feel are strengths, I may think are either weaknesses, obstacles, or potentially even threats.
Well, one, of course, is that there are still new openings happening around, and there's some major projects on the timeline. And I think that, to me, that's the biggest strength, is just showing that, okay, these things are still, there's still new construction happening, new things happening. I have here as my number one, capital flowing away from the U.S., which is one of those that I had kind of thought of it as a strength, because I was thinking it shows that there's international interest and it shows that there's expansion plans. But I think it could also be an opportunity or a threat or a weakness. It could be any of these, but all the buckets.
Yeah. So for me, it's interesting because I think that, yes, good, big capital investment is, I think, a strength for the industry overall.
Yeah.
Where that capital investment is going, I'm not sure whether that's a strength or a weakness if you operate primarily in the United States.
Yeah.
Because it kind of shows that the interest. Yes, there is still the Texas park. There's still the Texas Universal Park that is coming. There's still projects that are happening in the U.S., but most of the big announcements have been either in Europe or the Middle East.
That's right. Yeah. And to recap, because I was thinking of that when I was making my list, so I kind of recapped some of the stuff we're most excited about. This is not an exhaustive list, by the way, everybody listening. It's just some of the things that Scott and I are most excited about that we have talked about. We talked about the new Dollywood nighttime Halloween event. We talked about the Universal Kids Resort. We talked about the Netflix house expansions, not just in the two cities they're already in, but also going to Vegas. We talked about a lot of the coasters that are coming, especially some of the more fun ones. Like there's the Galactic coaster going to the Legoland parks. There's the Muppet redo, the Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets. There's the Six Flags parks have a slew of things coming out, even though that one was delayed at Magic Mountain, right? But then there's also the Night Flight Expedition at Dollywood, which we were both very excited about. So that's, then plus there's the one coming to Hollywood, opening here, Universal Studios Hollywood. But then when you look at like the big things that we have, like that I have in Gantum's strategic plan, is like the big things to pay attention to. It's Disney Abu Dhabi, it's Universal UK, it's Universal Saudi Arabia, it's the Harry Potter at Legoland Germany, because Merlin said it will be the single largest investment into an existing site. So that sounds really big. It's the Harry Potter land plan for Warner Brothers World, and it's the Pokemon theme park that's opening in Japan. So literally everything that's in terms of big things that I have on my list are like not happening in the US.
Well, and I think we also have to include there, even though it has opened already, it's going to continue to open and draw a great deal of attention, and that is Qiddiya City.
Yep.
We've got the Six Flags Qiddiya City, as well as Aquarabia, which will be opening very shortly as well.
And Disney Adventure World, which is the reopening over there in Paris. So it's kind of like when you look at the scale, I think it's like there's stuff that we're excited about, but there's also the stuff that like what belongs on a strategic plan in terms of having to align. And that's what we were thinking about at Gantum, is we're like, okay, we have to be ready to be servicing these projects where they are. And none of the big I'm sure that we'll do some work on some of these smaller projects, but the big things is going to be those. It's going to be all the Middle East and Europe, and then yes, that's basically it.
From a consultant standpoint, from an outside creative standpoint, I actually look at this variety as a strength. in the fact that there are giant projects that if you're not on already, chances are good you won't be brought onto until the tail end.
Yep.
And I'm talking about me and things that I do. The flip side of that is some of the smaller projects may be right sized for different outside contractors, different creatives, different vendors. So I think the biggest strength, if we're going to sort of sum it all up, I think the biggest strength right now in the industry is there is growth, and there is growth in many, many different areas and many, many different ways. Because it's not just the mega parks that are being announced outside of the U.S. Museums around the world are having a rebirth.
Yeah, museums are on the rise. That's my second item on here is the museums on the rise. And we saw that in the Theme Entertainment Association report that came out, where you saw, but it really was on the rise more. The U.S. museums saw a great year, but other countries like China, Asia, the Asia area saw better years than the U.S. So it's the same type of trend where it is a trend overall. It's a bigger trend other places. And a lot of it has to do with the extreme weather, but also with their ability to pivot into, I guess, more exciting. Like a great example of this is the Franklin Institute opening up the Universal Parks exhibition, which is happening next year in 2026. I know several people that have worked on that, and that's a good example, right?
The team at Franklin likes to they know they're a science museum, but they like to think of themselves as a theme park anyway. So they like to have that. They're so good at incorporating the fun in the factual, and so it makes total sense that they are the ones doing this. They're the ones who kicked off the touring Harry Potter museum exhibition. They're the ones who I believe started the Crayola Creativity exhibition as well. So they're really good at bringing in those touring exhibitions and giving them a place to start and kind of learn how to work things out. Because they recognize, oh, this is new, this is cool, and they also recognize that if this is fun, it also brings in guests and encourages subscriptions. So,
So I think, museums on the rise is I think a pretty big strength. Both of these, in terms of the capital and what's opening and the museums, are also on our list for Gantum as opportunities as well. Because for us, we do have, like, for example, we have fixtures that have been used in museums, but there's a lot that we could do to make it better ease of use for museums. And so that's a thing we have to consider. And then, like I said before, in terms of being in the right place or being ready to service the large projects when they start going into their purchasing phases internationally will be a big thing. So multi-bucket. Okay, so the next thing I have on here is something that Scott always talks about, and mainly because Scott talks about it, I put on here, is the death of the traditional large theme park, which apparently there was also over at Theme Park Insider, they had a whole thread about this. So I think maybe Scott, you're
I'm either pissing people off or I'm prognosticating the future. I don't know. But I also read, and I have not confirmed this information, but I've also read a couple of different articles that say attendance during the Christmas week here in Florida was not what it was anticipated to be. And they kind of broke it down in a couple of the articles. They actually broke it down to say that part of it is because with the economy the way it is, people are afraid to do a lot of holiday travel. And secondly, of course, the holiday season is when they block out all their pass holders. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And I've heard two different reports. One was a published article, and one was from someone I know who actually went during Christmas week, went to Magic Kingdom, Walt Disney World during Christmas week, and they said the crowds were just simply not there. So I think it's interesting to see how this is all playing out, because at the same time, the same people said the parks were empty, but Disney Springs was packed.
That's right.
So
we talked about this a few weeks ago when we did our looking at that report about what Gen Z and millennials want when they travel in 2026. But I think it's all wrapped into Scott's theory about the kind of like the death of the large mega park. And again, it's all the same. These all line up, right? Where it's like you're going to avoid the crowds because you don't, why are you bothering to wait? All this kind of like the allure of we have to wait 4 hours for this thing is kind of like dying out. And then also value, people being very value minded, all of that, the creature comforts, all these trends seem to be kind of combining. And we talked about this also a lot, about how that the Netflix house model could be precisely poised to kind of take some of that. But there's also the museums. I mean, I think this all related. I think that's why museums are on the rise, because it's, again, unless you're the Louvre, then you're kind of that's a whole other thing.
But they just didn't pay attention. They did not recognize the strength that they had, which was the incredible collection, but they ignored their weaknesses or their obstacles, which were the fact that the building was falling apart, and that the staff was miserable, and that there was security sucked.
Yeah.
There was a lot of problems that they had. But I just want to say, before people, I can hear people, even though we haven't released the episode yet, I can hear people typing their comments of Scott doesn't know what he's talking about when he says that the mega parks are dead. They're not dead. They're not going to go away completely. They're just not going to be, in my opinion, and based on what I'm seeing, they're not going to be the monoliths or the mega monsters that they once were. And I think that the way that some of these big parks are going to stay with their head above water and continue is by glomming onto the exact right IPs. And the thing that I would warn them about, and I think we're starting to see that. I know we're starting to see that in tiny ways here in Florida. For example, a lot of the Disney perks that were pulled when they felt that they could do no wrong and do no harm are starting to eke back in. So I think value is something that they are recognizing. Let me put it this way. I think the masterminds, the people much smarter than I am in the big parks, are starting to see this as well. And they're starting to recognize we've got to make it so that we don't have to deal with huge crowds. You don't have to take out a mortgage on your house to take your family on vacation. Yeah. I think they're starting to recognize that.
Well,
maybe it's just right sizing. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just right sizing after, being in charge for so long.
So I think that could be, again, it's the same thing as it could be an opportunity or it could be a threat. It could be any of the things. It could be a strength. I was going to say,
it depends on
it depends on what you are. Yeah, it depends on
if you're working for a giant park. It could be a threat or it could be an obstacle.
That's right. Yeah, and I had right under that. I had creature comforts, which I think exactly ties into exactly what you were saying, because it's the same thing where it's like a lot of what we heard in that report and a lot of the comments are the same thing. Creature comforts, like I remember the locker person being like mandatory $4 lockers for Gwazi, and it's like there just are things that it's like, if you think about it, you're like, why would I loved reading those comments actually when we did that episode, because you get a lot of the same perspective of people who are like, I'm already stressed from work and a whole week, and why am I gonna add extra stress? So the creature like having good access to good food is something everyone's talked about, but I think we're still not getting there.
So all of those things, in my opinion, are on the top of the opportunities list.
Yep.
Increasing good culinary, not making guests feel as though they're nickeled and dimed.
Yeah.
And there's ways to do that, without losing revenue. There's ways to do that without losing overall income for the park. You just move it around.
Yes.
And you recognize, I always recommend to my clients, for example, if you are doing a seasonal event where you do a daytime product and then a separate ticketed nighttime event, the smartest thing you can do, in my opinion, is to include your parking fee in the ticket.
Yeah.
So that you can advertise this ticket includes parking. And the reason for that is when you're trying to change out, in an hour or 2 hour time slot, when you're trying to change out all of your day guests and your incoming nighttime guests, the last thing you want to do is have a backup in the parking lot.
Yep.
So, and people are like, well, we can't afford to lose that money. And my response is, how many people are in most cars? Say there's an average of 3 people per car. Okay. What is your parking? $30. Great. Add $10 to each ticket and make it free parking. Guests are not going to notice. They're going to go, look, I got free parking on this event. That's great.
It's just going to come back to you in another way. They're going to buy food and beverage, or they're going to buy something.
And operationally, it helps you because you don't have to stop everybody.
And it's so annoying. But anyway, my favorite example of this is still Hershey Park, because I think their Halloween event is exactly everything we just talked about, because it's included for annual pass holders, which includes, it's seamless for annual per pass holders, where they can enjoy just more. They just get more. You just coming during Halloween season, you just get more as an annual pass holder there at Hershey Park. And then they also really, really invested in culinary to create a tasting card and to create dishes at all of their places that are kind of a little bit more in depth, more complex, right? And they have the new eatery, the Chocolate Town area, the new Spirit Bar. They have the new bar with mocktails. Like, I think they're basically checking off every opportunity, and they're finding a way to make it work in a larger park situation. Not a mega park, but a large park.
Well, and what we just talked about with the mega parks, they're kind of sneaking back in those opportunities. There's an opportunity to, and it's little things, but it's creature comfort things. It's transportation. They're improving transportation. They're making transportation more accessible. They're finding ways to get guests into. I mean, anything you can do. This is just to think about as an opportunity for your own industry, for your own business. Anything you can do so that your customers, your clients, or your guests feel as though their life is simpler because they do business with you.
That's right.
Is an opportunity.
That's right. Okay, so next I have here the K-shaped economy and how it's impacting design and sales. Well, I put and sales for me. Maybe you'd call it something different but for our company. So basically, I think this is also a little bit, maybe it's all related to what we just talked about, but we've been talking about this for a while. It's been happening in America, at least for a while. It's just the idea of the K-shaped, where you have more on the bottom and more on the top. And I think we're definitely seeing that as a manufacturer, because we're seeing that, you have the whole haunt industry and those FECs and all the local people that are making their own purchases potentially. Like they have one on-staff person, or they're already trying to. You have all that stuff, and then you have the Disney Universal kind of people for us, at least, where they're not, price is never an issue. It's more so almost the problems these two people face are really different from our standpoint, because on the bottom end, it's really value driven. It's really like, how much can we do with the budget that we have? And on the upper end, it's actually more about like the ease of operation. It's more like, how easily can this integrate? Like, they don't want the bunch of labor to fix stuff. They don't want it to go wrong. They don't want all this stuff. They want like ease of operation and ease of implementation. And so it is really almost different product lines. But when you think about it, you extend that out and you think about it as like guests also going to it. I think it's basically what we talk about. Like, you know what your guest is and where they're at, and how much value versus how much like the time and the like skipping the line stuff matters to them. And I think that would how I translate it to guests versus us, which is B2B.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think you have to recognize, here's going back to a phrase that has been used in my corner of the industry for many, many years. You got to shoot where the ducks are flying. So you have to recognize that there are those high-end people who want what they want, and they want the velvet rope experience. They want the ability to not have to wait in queue. They want the ability to again, make their lives as smooth as possible. I noticed this especially when I was doing work in China. When doing work in China, they know how to do VIP so incredibly well. And it's interesting because the same is true in the Middle East, but because of the culture, they get how to do that upper echelon. They've got that top tier of financial spend. They've got that covered. They've got it worked into their plans, and it's not something they have to create on the fly. It's something that exists in their business model. That, we've got 1.3% of the $1 million club. That's the people that but so they just plug it in, so they don't lose that high end revenue. They also have things that are accessible for the opposite end of the scale, so that everyone has the opportunity, or both ends of the economy has the opportunity to participate in your parks, but it's not something that you have to drastically reduce at the last minute. Work it in, think ahead of time. That's the whole purpose of doing a SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
So whatever your industry is, whether it's got, it may not have any super high end, or it may have not have any super low end. But don't just think I'm going to aim for the middle and it's going to satisfy everyone, because that is becoming less and less the truth, based on the way the economy is going right now.
That's right. That's right. I think of it as saving money versus saving time. And you got to think about, like, what do your guests want? Do they want to save money, or do they want to save time? And what percentage of it? And also, it could mean abandoning it. And I don't want to. At Gantom, we thought about this a lot, and especially with the tariffs impacting us quite heavily, we really had to be like, we have tried as much as we can to reduce costs, and we've made a lot of progress. I think we've actually reduced costs maybe 20 to 30%. So we're trying to balance it out. We're doing a lot of stuff to do that. But at the same time, the way that you have to engineer the product is just you almost like you just don't need it. If you're an indoor haunted attraction where we're not exposed to the weather, and you don't really, your lights aren't getting inspected, you don't need them to be UL listed. Plenty of attractions don't need to have UL listing stuff and all that. But it's like we have to manufacture for Disney. And so because of what has to go into that to manufacture to there, then I started telling people this at LDI. I'm like, we're not the best option for you. If your primary concern is money, we're not the best option. And that's because we have to engineer for saving time and for the ease of use, which is the Disney case. And that's how our stuff is engineered, And so, yeah, you kind of have to be like, this is where we're planting our flag, because it can't work on the other end. We don't want a race to the bottom of cost.
And to follow that up, if with your attraction, say for example you're an attraction owner, you may have to target either I'm going to do 5 $1 million tickets or $1 million $5 tickets. You have to focus and decide. You may not be able to be both.
Yeah.
You may not be able to appeal to both.
Yep. So I have a clump here as our next ones, which is like, I guess, relating to AI. So there's a lot of uncertainty around AI, but I need to unpack that, because when I say it's a lot, so there's an uncertainty around AI, but there's also like a loss of trust in institutions, which is also part of the AI thing. So I think, and then there's a stat that I put in my report, which is from the Reuters Institute, that said for the first time this year, social media beat TV as people's go-to news source. And then paired that with that the TikTok is staying and the algorithm is not changing, or neither is the data sources. So it's just a different landscape marketing wise for attractions and for companies. And when I say that the AI is uncertain, it's not just about the uncertainty that it pushes into these, like basically, if you're getting your news from TikTok, but if you're not sure if the TikTok is real or not, that's uncertainty. So there's that, right? But then there's also, it's like the deep fake part of the AI, but then there's also the uncertainty it's injecting into the economy, where it's like, 40% of our market right now is being made up of AI related companies. And like, if their valuations dip, we're in a recession. Will it dip? Will it not dip? Also, it's like we become a fragile economy in many ways because of our over-reliance on AI. And you could say that's a great thing if you believe there's not a bubble, but if you believe there is a bubble, it could be a very dangerous thing. And I think all that is, I think that the impact for attractions is relatively low. And it's because I think most of the people impacted by that are going to be the high income earners. And so it's back to what we just talked about. If the majority of your money is from high income earners that are invested in the stock market, that could be a potential threat for you, depending on like how those people feel about their liquidity. But if not, then I think you're relatively stable from that uncertainty. So where it would be a problem is in the authenticity part I mentioned at the beginning, where it's injecting, like, you don't know what's a deep fake and what's not and everything. And the Instagram team actually released out their kind of like 2026 best practices looking forward thing. And they did mention how the raw videos that are kind of on the rise, because if it looks too good, people aren't sure if it's real, versus if it looks like, if it looks like, you know, that's part of it. It's like, does this look like your park? Does this look like a thing that could have been shot there? Does it look like, you know, or does it look like a movie that, like, you know, I think the days of making the movie type things, like trailers that Universal's done for their haunted houses, is probably not great, because you're not sure if people aren't sure if it's real. Versus,
and I think the most basic version of this is the preference now of shooting vertically versus shooting horizontally.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, that is the most basic of the shift to vertical. The reason I think more people started to prefer the vertical format was because, that's got to be real because someone's shooting it on their phone. You know, it's a unique situation, and I think that, you know, when it comes to AI, I think it's something that we have to keep an eye on, because this is, yes, it is a potential threat, I think.
Yeah.
However, I also think it's a great opportunity. Just like with any new tool, there's always going to be a certain fear. There's always going to be a, how do we use this tool? You know, going back 100,000 years, not quite that far, but when they started using cars versus horses, a lot of people don't realize that there were huge organizations that were terrified and thought that the use of automobiles and, you know, human beings traveling this fast was going to kill out the human race. So, you know, it's one of those situations where you have to kind of look at it, and as Philip said, you have to kind of evaluate, how is this going to work for me? Yep. You know, I've said it before. AI is not going to is not going to replace anybody, but somebody who can use AI might replace somebody who can't use AI. So
I think whether it's a threat or opportunity depends on the ownership. So, like, if you are an employee and you're owning AI to help you be a better employee, versus if you are a team leader who is using AI to, like, replace employees. I mean, it depends on the ownership. Who owns it? Like, who owns the usage? Like, where is the ownership rights? Where do you own your work, or does the company own your work that then they can replace you with it? Or are they, you know, and is it going to be something that destroys way more jobs this year, or is it going to be something that makes our productivity as a country go higher? And in the theme park industry, it's, again, a little bit more insulated, because we don't quite yet have robots that do a lot of our entry level and a lot of that stuff. But, you know, so I think the higher end, like almost like what Scott and I do, is a little bit more at risk, I think, than a lot of the bulk of your, you know, right. You're going to need somebody that's going to still be moving people around and guest services and all that stuff, is for the time being still. But the rest of it, I think, is a question of ownership.
Yep. And I think we've learned that people are the best form of AI. You know, people can adapt to a situation, they can adjust to a situation in real time. And when it comes to guest service, I think that's one of the things that we have to continue to remember, because I think Disney kind of learned that people got tired of that quick. So make sure that you work that into your plan, so that you don't rely on AI for things that should probably be done by real humans. Just something to think about. All right. Well, look at that. We're done. I don't know how we finished that so quickly, but we did, and we probably didn't cover half the things on Philip's list.
No, I still have like 5 or 6.
That's okay. That's okay, because we will talk about that and kind of how to take this information and utilize it in our Patreon show, Unhinged. But for now, guys, thank you all very, very much for watching. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe.
Please subscribe. Yes, please.
Please subscribe. And because the sooner you subscribe, the more likely it is that we'll be able to continue this. And hopefully you're getting something out of it. And even if it's just 30 minutes of listening to us ramble. So thank you very much. Have a great new year, and we will see you next week.